As you may have guessed from the name of my channel, Shuckle is my favorite Pokemon. However, its representation in the TCG is a bit limited. So today I wanted to look at all of the Shuckle cards that have been printed and discuss a little bit about Shuckle's role in the TCG. Typically, when you look at the history of particular Pokemon in the TCG, they tend to reflect in-game stats about the Pokemon. For example, Chansey usually has really high HP, and it usually has attacks that let you heal your Pokemon, kind of like in the game when you can use Soft Boiled. A lot of Chansey cards also get the attack Double Edge as a callback to the original base set one. And if you look across the history of Gyarados cards that have been printed, they usually have attacks that require a lot of energy but also deal a ton of damage for whatever format they're in. Gyarados also gets Hyper Beam a lot. If you look across all the cards that are printed, a lot of them have Hyper Beam. Gyarados loves that Hyper Beam. And apart from in-game stats, Pokemon can also get attacks or themes based around their in-game lore. If you look at cards like Darkrai, a lot of Darkrai cards are focused around sleep because it's the Nightmare Pokemon. It also has like double sleep where your opponent has to flip 2 coins between turns that all tie into this in-game lore. Mew also has this in-game lore of being the first Pokemon, of being able to learn any move, and that's reflected in the card game. The majority of Mew cards have some kind of ability or attack that let it copy moves of other Pokemon on the field or use moves that it doesn't have itself. So let's take a look at Shuckle and see how it's developed over the years. In nearly 2 decades of the TCG, Shuckle has only had 9 cards printed, which is a bit disappointing to a Shuckle fan like me. So it was first printed in the Neo Genesis set where, you know, it's pretty good. It gets an attack to prevent damage, 20 damage for 2 energy. It's not bad. Neo Revelation had a similar Shuckle. This one has an ability that if any damage that's 40 or under is dealt to Shuckle, it just counts as 10. And then that Toxic Saliva attack, you can get double poison, but you have to flip a coin for it. So again, it's not bad. It's just also not good. It's kind of right in the middle. The Skyridge Shuckle continues that pattern. It gets an ability that reduces all damage by 20, and you get that Poisonous Saliva attack for 2 energy that just poisons your opponent's Pokemon. The Unseen Forces Shuckle was a little bit more viable because its ability, or Pokebody rather, prevented damage done to it by Pokemon EX. So this could be helpful if your opponent's running an all EX deck or something. You could toss this thing out there and let it poison your opponent, and then you just kind of have to stall out and chip away at it. Next up is the Secret Wonder Shuckle, and guess what? It has a body that prevents damage done to it, this time by any Pokemon with special energy attached to it. And guess again, an attack for 2 energy that poisons your opponent. Beginning to see a pattern here. And no surprises here, the Heart Gold Soul Silver Shuckle has a body that prevents damage. This time when it's on your bench, it prevents all damage done to it. But this time its attack actually does a decent chunk of damage. It does 30 damage for 2 fighting energy as well as poisoning your opponent's Pokemon. The Heart Gold Soul Silver set also had a promo Shuckle, which probably has my favorite art and maybe my favorite Shuckle card out of all of them. This one has Fermenting Liquid, which every time you attach an energy, you get to draw a card. And also Shell Stunner, which doesn't poison, but it does prevent damage possibly from the next attack. And with Legendary Treasures, we finally get to move away from that preventing damage, poisoning your opponent. This Shuckle actually has an attack that lets you heal one of your benched for 40 damage. And then its secondary attack is not very viable. It is, again, another really middle-of-the-road kind of Shuckle. And the latest Shuckle card printed is from XY Fates Collab, where it again gets 2 very mediocre attacks. As you can see across Shuckle cards, Shuckle has always been a support Pokemon, but never all that great at it really. It's never been able to stand on its own. And you would think with a Pokemon that has the highest defense and special defense in the entire series that it would get a little more love with some card effects, some exaggerated Pokebodies or abilities. As we just saw, one of the patterns for Shuckle to get in the TCG is an ability or an attack that prevents damage. However, I would really like to see that beefed up a little bit. Maybe like the Jungle Mystery Mime ability where you could only deal damage to it if it was under a certain amount. Or maybe given an ability where you have to deal a massive amount of damage before it can even hit Shuckle. This would fall more in line with Shuckle's in-game stats, and I actually don't mind the attacks it's been given, where it can just poison your opponent and then sit there and stall until they die from poison. That actually fits kind of perfectly, especially when you look at VGC, where your Shuckle movesets are just going to boost defense so it doesn't take damage, and then Toxic Stall for the rest of the game. You could add a similar effect to Shuckle cards, because Shuckle does get Infestation and Wrap, which have those similar effects of just chipping away damage over time. But when it comes to in-game lore, Shuckle does not get very much variety either. Seriously, look at this thing's Pokedex entries. All they say is it hides in rocks and it makes berry juice. Apparently, those are the only two things a Shuckle can do. One of the interesting things about Shuckle in the games is if you let it hold a berry for long enough, it will turn it into berry juice, which is an item that can help you heal Pokemon. The Legendary Treasure Shuckle kind of played on that, where you can heal one of your bench Pokemon, but I think there's a lot more interesting things you can do with that. Shuckle ferments these berries, and you have to let it share that sweet, sweet Shuckle wine. Shuckle has the potential to be an amazing support Pokemon in the TCG if you just combine certain aspects of things that it's had before. Give it an ability that makes it really difficult to put damage counters on it, and combine that with attacks that either let you poison your opponent or that let you heal your own Pokemon. But it would really need to be beefed up in order to contend with the power creep that's happened. Everything has such high HP now, even double damage isn't really going to affect all that much. Give this thing triple poison damage. Healing 40 damage with an attack doesn't stack up all that well. Now, there's a Miltank that can heal 80 damage. Give that to Shuckle. You know, this is coming from a Shuckle fanboy, but I don't think that any of these things are unreasonable. I just think that Shuckle has been shortchanged in the TCG considering its in-game stats. Anyway, thank you for watching. I really enjoyed putting together this video. If you have any Pokemon that you would like to see the TCG history of, let me know. Just put it down in those comments. Also, let me know in the comments if you are also a Shuckle fan that is outraged by its TCG history.